Does engine capacity actually affect how long a man's fine four-wheel drive wanking tractor will last? Does size actually matter? Time for a healthy reality check on this. So, brace for impact, you beard-stroking, scientifically illiterate sons and daughters of outback conquering back-o-burk bogans. I'm John Cadogan from AutoExpert.com.au and I get new cars cheap for buyers here in Australia. You can inquire at the website about that. Shortly, a question from a dude named Russ and his lovely wife, Gay. That's a proper noun, I'm assuming, and not an adjective, just for complete disambiguation on this. But first, Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes F1 Racing. They're doing it again, ladies and gentlemen, dudes and dudettes, and tragically, nobody in the media is calling them out on it again. Such is the gravimetric potential of the three-pronged suppository in F1 racing. Link just up there somewhere. My exclusive report on the blog, ad-free and available only to fine, upstanding auto expert aficionados such as your fine self and, of course, hotties. They continue to get in free every time. It's just the way of the world, frankly. Back to Russ now, and non-adjectival Gay. I imagine them there on the couch, stroking each other's beards and fantasizing about the proportional contribution of capacity to engine durability. Yes, what a fine way to spend a Friday evening. I have a very free-ranging imagination. I'll have you know, it's a curse, frankly. That's not funny. Like, I don't know about you, but I simply cannot meet someone for the first time without immediately imagining them nude. I'm pretty sure most of us do that, but perhaps it is a unique character defect. In any case, I have absolutely no control over it. Just like, bam, nude, like a light bulb going on, only somewhat more graphic. Pleased to meet you, Trev, Shaz. I have to say that at times, maintaining a straight face is quite the challenge. Anyway, now that we've got that out in the open, I imagine Russ and non-adjectival Gay stroking their beard and or beards nude and pondering the following technical question. We have a 2.8-tonne Caravan and choose the BT50 as our vehicle as it had a bigger motor. As you know, most of the vehicles in this range have a high towing capacity, but the engine capacity varies considerably. Our thinking was that the bigger motor wouldn't be working as hard to pull the van as a smaller motor. 2 points of order on this, okay? Firstly, caravan addiction absolutely is a thing, and it's so insidious. It starts in a web browser, and before you know it, you've got some 30-foot Scorpion King Outback routing box with its optional acoustically transparent shitter parked on the front grass, devaluing the entire neighbourhood. That's the inheritance, basically. Toast. So, well done, Russ and non-adjectival Gay nude for admitting the problem. Thankfully, help for caravan addiction is now available nationwide. I think Medicare covers it. Caravan addiction is curable in 90% of cases if detected early. Simply book a suite in a 5-star hotel for 1 week and, of course, see your doctor if symptoms persist. Secondly, whatever job the engine's doing, okay, it's climbing a hill at 80 or cruising on the flat at 100, whatever, the powertrain is overcoming a fixed set of resistances and generally much less than its peak outputs are being demanded, okay? Engines in vehicles are rarely called upon to do all that they can. But I kind of get what you're saying, right? Smaller engines do seem to be doing more with less, and they seem to work proportionally harder, kind of like a middleweight up against Iron Mike. In many of your recent comments on this range of vehicles, you put the Triton as one of the best in the range. My concern is that they have a 2.4 litre motor, but the same towing capacity as the BT50 with 3.2 litre motor. I'm not a mechanic, but I'm thinking that the Triton motor would be working harder to pull our van and so be prone to more problems. I would be interested in your comments on this. Actually, the Triton has a 3.1 tonne tow capacity and the BT notionally has 3.5 tonnes. The 3.5 tonne capacity in the BT does come with some fairly hefty compromises. However, it's not very practical, nor, in my view, is it particularly safe to do this. But I get what you're saying. I don't agree with it, frankly, but I get where you're coming from. It's from a point of reasonably rational conjecture, at least. In essence, you're doing this bilateral beard stroking, you and non-adjectival gay nude in my imagination, and I can't help this, bear in mind. There's no doubt, that's not funny, that the Triton is doing whatever work with less engine capacity for any given set of loads. So, yeah, that adds up at least. When you look at the peak power figures, right, BT50 is making 46 kilowatts for every litre of engine displacement. Triton's making 55, right? So the specific power output of Triton, which would be kilowatts per litre, is about 20% higher than the BT. The Nissan Navara 2.3, right? It's about 61 kilowatts per litre, which is 32% above the BT. The Amarok 3-litre V6 diesel is roughly identical to Navara in its specific power output, slightly higher, 37% above the BT. Plenty of engines are in this ballpark, but when you look at the Hyundai Santa Fe or Kia Sorento 2.2 diesel, at about 76 kilowatts per litre, that's 65% higher than the BT50. And the 2-litre HMG turbo diesel in Sportage and Tucson, right, that's roughly the same as Triton and Amarok V6. The point being, okay, none of these engines, which have all been deployed in the market for such a long time now, none of them have developed a reputation for early catastrophic failure or premature wear stemming from being too pumped up. These kinds of failures in small diesel engines are rare. Statistically, it just does not happen. What's more common with modern diesels is weakest link type of failures that have nothing to do with power production at all. And what I'm talking about in general here, across the range in the SUV market, are things like this, okay? A dodgy EGR valve might just fail in service, dump all the coolant out the exhaust pipe, and then fry and seize the engine, or maybe a high-pressure fuel pump packs up and destroys the whole injection system. In a Toyota Land Cruiser, the air filter might fail and dust might destroy the engine. These failures are catastrophic, certainly, but they do not have anything to do with power production, and they are far more prolific out there in service. There is nothing outrageous, engineering, applied science type outrageous, about how tightly any of these modern diesels is wound up. They're all fairly conservative. I certainly understand the logic behind the nude, bilateral beard stroking, more is less hypothesis kind of thing, but it seems plausible. It just happens to be bullshit as well, right? Because what you do with a hypothesis is you test it with an experiment. And this experiment has been running out there on our roads for years now. These engines simply do not fail because they are excessively cranked up for their size. They just don't. It's not a thing. Engine durability has far more to do with how well the engineers in R&D identify premature failure modes and how well they design all of those components, the rings and the bearings and the valves and the timing chains, and whether the budget is going to tolerate any remedy that they discover down the track before that car gets into production. Like, if you know, as an engineer in the skunk works, okay, working on a prototype, that you really should re-engineer that EGR valve or that air filter, whatever, to increase the engine's reliability, you will need bean counter approval to spend the big bucks. And sometimes when you apply, they respond with the sex and travel response, right? Less than ideal, but hey, these vehicles make it into production. These engines do not fail because they can't handle making enough power to tow your fine Outback rooting wagon. In fact, transmissions and driveline components generally tend to be the weakest links on this. Russ and non-adjectival gay continue to ask their clothing optional technical questions. Your comments on the four-wheel drive capacities and where you can use four-wheel drive, i.e. on wet roads, etc., was interesting, although I did not fully understand it all. Suffice to say, some makes have a better four-wheel drive system than others. Okay, so just to clarify this, realistically, it's fair to say that most utes have a four-wheel drive system that might have been considered cutting edge back in about 1970. But most utes today are really still just offering three basic drive settings, okay? Two-wheel drive high range, usually rear drive, four-wheel drive high and four-wheel drive low range. And you cannot use either four-wheel drive, high or low, on a high traction surface like bitumen or concrete, dry or wet, or even a good unsealed road, because the front and rear prop shafts in the drivetrain will be locked together if you select four-wheel drive. It is a very basic gearbox arrangement in the middle. Two ranges, no flexibility. The front and rear prop shafts rotate synchronously when you select four-wheel drive, whether they want to or not, okay? They are locked in this 1-to-1 ratio. And if you try to use four-wheel drive on a grippy surface, all of that grip generated by the high traction surface places extremely high stresses on the transfer case, because those shafts, they want to turn at different rates every time the vehicle negotiates a curve, because the front and rear ends travel through different paths of different lengths. Therefore, different rotational rates are required. This stress is called transmission wind-up, colloquially, and it is such a great way to break something really expensive down there. So you're kind of stuck with two-wheel drive high range for the vast majority of driving that you do in the vast majority of, notionally, four-wheel drive utes. Like, yeah, it's a four-wheel drive, but you will mainly be driving it in two-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, for most of its life. However, with Triton and Amarok, you get actual all-wheel drive on a high traction surface. Instead of the prop shafts being mechanically locked together, there is a differential between them. At least there's a differential in Triton. Amarok might use a different system. It could be viscous coupled. I don't know. I'd have to do actual research, and you know by now how philosophically opposed I am to working that hard for a package such as this. But it amounts to the same thing, okay? You can use four-wheel drive in high range in these vehicles on a high traction surface, because the prop shafts are free to rotate at different rates, because slip between them is allowed by a more complex mechanism. Thus, there is no wind-up problem with the transmission. It won't break, and I think you'd agree that's kind of nice. This is a huge advantage when you're trying to put a lot of tractive effort to the ground at low speeds, say on a wet road or something, because you are splitting the drive that's available between all four wheels and not just pumping it to the two down the back. In this mode, four-wheel drive with the centre diff unlocked, the vehicle operates kind of like a Subaru. And of course, when it's really slippery, like all-wheel drive slippery, sandy, muddy, really deep snow, whatever, you can lock the centre diff and lock those drive shafts together for even greater tractive effort when loss of traction is likely. It's just like an all-wheel drive SUV. You click a switch or hit a button or something and a solenoid just drags the mechanism across and locks the centre diff. Frankly, it gobsmacks me that more utes don't offer all-wheel drive. Like, it's nearly 2021 and Philip K. Dick, #legend, thought we'd have flying friggin' cars by now. And yet, essentially, we've actually still got drive systems that were looking kind of Joan Rivers towards the end of last century in most utes. I don't know why. That's all I've got for you on this, though. My capacity for nude question answering is, of course, finite. I hope this helps. And if you want more, and who doesn't, don't forget the report on Mr. Inclusivity and three-pronged suppository racing, just up there. And link in the description, naturally. Now, to July, August, September, October, November, and of course, December, I say, fuck you very much. Remainder of 2020. Do kindly piss off now, as, speaking on behalf of the human race, despite never being elected to do so, I think it's fair to say we've all had quite enough of 2020, and if it leaves early, none of us will be crying in our friggin' schooners. To you, resident of Girt by Sea, Shitsville, I challenge you once again as your future Prime Minister to make Australia less shit. It is, after all, your civic duty. Just a little bit less shit, okay? I mean, how hard can it really be?